There is a lion in the mirror. There is a moment, quiet and fleeting, when a man catches his reflection and docility recognize it, not because his face has changed, but because the eyes looking back no longer belong to someone who dares to think. We are raised to become sheep, compliant, obedient, grateful. But what if we remembered we were lions all along? In a world that praises conformity and punishes boldness, thinking for yourself becomes the most dangerous act. And in that danger, Nietzsche whispers not caution, but challenge. Think like a lion, not loudly, not violently, but with such piercing boldness that the world, even if it fears you, cannot look away. The comfort of the cage, there is no sound in the beginning. It's only a soft, ambient hush, the kind of quiet that doesn't come from peace, but from control. A wide field stretches into the fog, open, serene. But if you look closely, something's wrong. There are no tracks, no signs of movement. Just stillness, as if the world itself is holding its breath. And there in the center stands a man. Still, upright, wrapped not in chains, but in comfort. We are not born in cages. We are born wild, not reckless, but untamed, curious, hungry, alive. But the world is patient. It does not force us into cages. It teaches us to build them ourselves. Each bar begins as something beautiful. A parent's approval, teacher's smile, a soft pat on the head when we follow instructions. Praise, encouragement, belonging. Little rewards for little silences. Carl Jung warned us of the persona, the social mask we construct not to deceive others but to survive them. As children, we begin to sense it, that certain truths must remain unspoken, certain questions must be swallowed, certain thoughts must be hidden behind smiles. And so we learn to play the role, not because we are weak, but because we are intelligent. We become what the world wants us to be: polite, predictable, pleasant, and the wildness fades. Picture a hallway, long marble floors, mirrors on either side. Each mirror reflects a version of the man, smiling, nodding, polished. But none of them show the real face, only the acceptable one. He walks through it daily, nods at the reflections, repeats the script, not from malice, not from fear, but because the warmth of the herd is addictive. Friedrich Nietzsche spoke of the herd instinct, the primal urge to belong to the many, not because we agree, but because we fear being alone. To be bold is to stand apart. To be different is to risk exile. And exile hurts, so we trade our teeth for smiles, our hunger for approval, our questions for applause. And slowly, invisibly, we become domesticated. Society does not demand obedience with weapons. It seduces it with comfort. You are not told to stay silent. You are rewarded for it. You are not punished for thinking, unless you think differently. Imagine a city made of glass, clear towers, transparent walls. Nothing is hidden, but everything is watched. Here, everyone is polite, everyone smiles. But beneath the surface, there is a quiet desperation. A man walks the streets, his eyes flick from one face to another, all smiling, all nodding, but none truly seeing. He tries to speak, but his words bounce off the glass, unheard, unwelcome. So he learns to stay quiet, and the silence begins to feel like virtue. Kierkegaard once wrote that the greatest danger, that of losing oneself, can pass off in the world as quietly as if it were nothing. And this is how it happens. Not with violence, not with rebellion, but with slow, willing surrender. The man sits at a desk, a perfectly symmetrical room. Screen glows in front of him. He scrolls. He nods. He agrees. Not because he believes, but because disagreement feels dangerous, unnecessary, lonely. So he blends in, Schopenhauer said. A man can be himself only so long as he is alone. And if he does not love solitude, he will not love freedom. But solitude is cold, and the cage is warm, so we stay. And convince ourselves that comfort is happiness. There's no outburst, there's no riot, no rebellion, only rituals. The ritual of silence when you want to speak. The ritual of laughing when you don't find it funny. The ritual of saying yes when your soul screams no. Over time, these rituals form identity, and the cage becomes home. Alan Watts once compared the self to a wave in the ocean, believing it is separate, believing it must conform to the other waves or be swallowed. But the truth is, it is the ocean. The illusion is not that we are imprisoned. The illusion is that the prison is necessary. There's a moment, quiet, private. The man returns home, takes off his shoes, loosens his tie, looks in the mirror. He sees a life others would call successful. He sees a man others respect, but something aches. Not pain, not sorrow. Something deeper, emptiness. The sense that somewhere long ago, he betrayed something. It's not another person. Himself, Jung called this betrayal the rejection of the shadow, the part of us we hide to be accepted, our chaos, our creativity, our dangerous clarity. We traded it for peace, and peace turned to stagnation. The tragedy of conformity is not that it kills the body. It kills the spirit, gently, daily, with a smile. The man returns to the glass hallway. He passes the mirrors, pauses. One mirror is cracked, a small fracture, almost unnoticeable. But it's there. And for the first time, he doesn't look away. He stares. And something behind his eyes begins to flicker. Not a thought. A memory. A growl. Because somewhere behind the routines, the rituals, the rehearsed smiles, a lion is sleeping. And it is beginning to wake. When fire turns to fog, it doesn't happen in a moment. There is no explosion, no collapse, no alarm. Only a subtle dimming, a flame once vivid, flickers. And though it still burns, it no longer illuminates. Its light, now muted, suffocates beneath a fog too soft to fear. You don't even notice it at first. You keep walking, keep performing, keep thinking, sort of. But the questions grow quieter. The wonder turns to routine. Soon you're no longer chasing truth, you're chasing updates. The screen glows like an altar in a dark room. A man sits, eyes glazed, scrolling endlessly. Not with joy, not even curiosity, but a kind of compulsive obedience. His thoughts once moved like wild rivers. Now they loop like background music in a waiting room. He nods along, agrees silently, not because he believes, but because believing is no longer the point. Thinking has become a performance, an aesthetic. Somewhere deep inside, the flame recoils. Nietzsche warned us of this. The danger is not being silenced by force, but being seduced by comfort. A society doesn't need to ban ideas if it can flood you with distractions. A crowd doesn't need to burn books if you're too tired to read them. And so, we lose not through war, but through ease. In this modern fog, everything is fed to you. In images, in sound bites, in shimmering fragments of borrowed thought. You can know everything and understand nothing. You can hear 10 opinions and form none. You can watch the world unfold and never truly see it. There's a hallway again, but now it's warped, endless, flickering, digital. Screens line the walls. Each offers a version of the truth, a shortcut to enlightenment, a 1-minute answer to a question you never asked. You walk through it, swiping left and right, absorbing everything, and yet remembering nothing. You think you're learning, but you're only collecting fragments. And fragments never build understanding. Alan Watts once said, "The menu is not the meal, but in the fog, the menu becomes enough." We stare at pictures of wisdom. We repost quotes about depth. We mistake familiarity for insight. And slowly we forget what hunger even felt like. Picture a city, glass towers, smooth roads. Every word auto-corrected, every conflict softened, every corner surveilled. In this city, people smile. They nod. They whisper the same ideas, lightly edited versions of what they heard an hour ago. No one questions anymore, not because they're forbidden, but because they've forgotten how. Thinking has not been outlawed, it has been outsourced. Carl Jung once warned that the greatest danger lies in unconscious living, in becoming so adapted to the world's expectations that you forget your own nature. The persona, once a tool, becomes a prison, and in this fog, that prison is velvet-lined. A man walks through a forest. It is not made of trees, but of mirrors. Its tall, distorted panes of glass. each one reflecting him, but slightly altered. Some show him younger, some show him stronger. Some show him successful, adored, envied. He passes them all, confused. He touches one, and the glass ripples, not like a reflection, but a suggestion. Each mirror doesn't reflect who he is, it reflects who he should be, according to someone else. He walks deeper into the forest, the mirrors multiply, and soon he forgets which one was ever real. Schopenhauer believed that suffering comes not from pain alone, but from illusion, from mistaking the unreal for the true, from wandering through a hall of echoes and calling it life. This is the fog, a gentle numbness, an absence of clarity, a life not of agony, but of amnesia. The man wakes one morning, feels fine, not good, not bad, just fine. He drinks coffee, checks headlines, smiles politely. But inside, something has been lost. Not a memory, not a dream. Something more vital. The will. Nietzsche called it the death of intellectual courage, the moment a man no longer dares to look into the abyss. Not because he's afraid of what he'll find, but because he's forgotten it's even there. This is how boldness dies. Not with chains, but with pillows. Not through censorship, but through convenience. Kierkegaard saw it as despair, not the loud kind, not the wailing kind, but the kind that wears a smile, that goes to work, pays its bills, updates its software. The despair of the man who no longer asks who he is, because he's too busy updating his profile. In the fog, nothing is forbidden, everything is allowed, but nothing matters. You are free to say anything. And so you say nothing worth saying. You are free to think anything, but your thoughts never cut deep enough to bleed. You are free to go anywhere, but every path looks the same. This quiet forgetting, you no longer feel imprisoned, but you are no longer free, because the true prison is indifference. Back in the mirrored forest, the man stops, breathes, closes his eyes, and in the silence he remembers something, not a fact, not an idea, a feeling, the feeling of being alive, not distracted, not consumed, but awake. And for the first time in years, he doesn't swipe, doesn't scroll, he doesn't smile, he just listens. And in that stillness, the fog begins to thin, not all at once, but just enough to see the first flicker of flame. Still there, still waiting. Yes. The abyss has teeth. There comes a moment when the ground beneath you no longer feels like ground, where everything that once felt solid, your beliefs, your identity, your past, begins to dissolve, quietly like ink in water. It doesn't come with thunder. No voices cry out, no signs tell you to turn back. Only a door, old stone, silent, waiting. You stand before it, and for the first time, no one is watching.
The descent
Begins when you stop pretending, not to others, to yourself. When the mask grows too heavy to hold, when the script no longer fits the shape of your thoughts, and every conversation feels like translation, every glance, a test of how well you still fit in. But you don't, not anymore. Not because you're rebellious, but because something inside you finally whispered, "This isn't me." Jung called this confrontation the path to individuation, the death of the false self and the birth of the real one. But birth is never painless, and death, even of illusion, is still a kind of death. Imagine a cave, black as ink, its entrance low like a bow. You cannot walk in proud, you must crawl. Outside, the world is warm. Familiar, safe, family, friends, familiar voices. But they do not follow you here. They cannot. Because to enter this cave is to leave behind everything that made you recognizable. Not your name, your mind. Inside there is no map, only echo. Every word you once believed bounces back at you, warped. I must always be good, must always be liked, I must always succeed. They ring in the hollow dark like lullabies turn threats. In this place, truth doesn't appear as light, it appears as emptiness. Friedrich Nietzsche described it as the abyss, not a pit, but a presence. You look into it, not with your eyes, but with your soul, and it looks back, not to punish you, to ask you, who are you without your roles, without the applause, without the borrowed beliefs, without the crowd? Do you know here your ego begins to peel, not by force, but because you no longer need it? It was a costume, and the play is over. But this is not liberation. Not yet. This is despair. The kind Kierkegaard understood intimately, yet the despair of failure. The despair of shedding everything false, only to realize you don't know what's real. It feels like dying. Because in a way, it is. The death of comfort. The death of certainty. The death of being understood. You may reach for help. Try to explain. But the language doesn't work anymore. Your questions disturb people. Your silence unsettles them. Not because you're broken, but because you no longer speak the language of illusion. An illusion is what makes the world feel safe. The cave deepens. You pass ruins, shattered statues of who you were, achievements that once filled you with pride, now reduced to symbols of someone else's definition of success. Trophies of obedience, memories of mimicry. See yourself kneeling before them, worshipping, and it breaks you. Not because they were lies, but because you believed them. You believed that fitting in was the same as belonging, that performing was the same as living, that pleasing others would someday please you. Didn't. In this cave, there is no one to impress. No algorithm to feed, no crowd to entertain, no parent to please. Only you and your silence. Schopenhauer called it the place of solitude, not loneliness, but sacred separation, where you stop pretending to be anything other than what you are. At first it is unbearable. Then it becomes beautiful. Alan Watts once said that we are not separate from the universe. We are expressions of it, but to see this, you must dissolve. Dissolve the ego, the labels.
All the voice in your head telling you what you should be. All of it must go.
Only then can you become what you are. The man sits in the center of the cave. He is no longer trying to escape. He stares into the darkness. And then he sees them. Eyes, watching him from within the void. Not hostile, not kind, just present. The abyss has teeth, but it does not bite. It waits, because it knows the truth. You are not meant to conquer it. You're meant to become it. And here, in the deepest part of the descent, something awakens. Not a scream, not a roar. A breath. A slow, ancient breath from something buried beneath years of pretending. The lion, not the image, not the fantasy, but the real thing. And it does not speak. It remembers. It remembers the wildness, the truth, the sovereignty. It remembers that you were never meant to belong to the world. You were meant to meet it unflinching. This is not the end of the descent, but it is the end of forgetting. You will rise, changed, shaken, but no longer confused, because now you have met yourself in the dark. And the self that survives the abyss is no longer afraid of anything. The mirror that shatters, there is a silence so heavy, it begins to press against the skin. Not like absence, but like presence. Thick, unmoving. The man stands alone in a circular room. Stone walls, no doors. Only one thing occupies this space. A mirror, tall and wide, like a portal carved into the wall of the mind. He's seen it before. He's walked past it his entire life, fixing his collar, practicing smiles. Each time it told him who he was. Polite, presentable, predictable. But today, something is different. Today, the mirror stares back. In the depths of solitude, something begins to fracture. Not externally, not in the body, not in the world, but in the psychic core. A rupture, quiet, sacred, necessary. This is not healing. This is collapse. Carl Jung called it the confrontation with the shadow, the meeting of the hidden self, the unacceptable, the animal, the rage, the lust, the hunger. The truth, not evil, but buried. Buried beneath years of social grooming, politeness, and spiritual makeup. Self-exiled in order to be loved. But it never died. It waited. And now it has returned. The man approaches the mirror. This time the reflection twitches. It doesn't move. But it does. It smirks when he's serious. Tilts its head when he looks straight. Laughs silently when he pretends to be fine. Then it whispers, not in words, but in presence. I am what you denied. The shadow is not a demon. It is the parts of you too real for the world. Your defiance, your vision, your anger, your rawness. It's the voice that said no when everyone demanded yes. It's the lion behind the sheep's mask. To confront it is not to destroy it, it is to integrate it. But integration is not a peaceful process. It's violent, not outwardly, inwardly. It feels like betrayal, because everything you were taught to be good, obedient, selfless, begins to rot in your hands. You were not meant to erase yourself for approval. You were meant to carry the whole of who you are, even the parts that make others uncomfortable, especially those parts. Picture the man now, breathing heavily. The mirror begins to shimmer, not with light, but with memory. Images flash. A child punished for speaking the truth. A teenager who learned that silence brings safety. An adult who built a life of masks. Layer upon layer, year after year, until even he forgot what lay underneath. And suddenly, crack. A fracture blooms across the glass. The reflection no longer obeys. Friedrich Nietzsche once wrote, "You must become who you are." But he also warned, to become who you are, you must first destroy who you are not. This is not transformation, it is revelation. You do not become the lion, you remember it. You were never soft, only silenced. The man watches the pieces of the mirror tremble. They no longer hold the image. They flicker, reflecting instead the possibility of self. Not fixed, but fluid. Not perfect, but real. This is where the battle begins, not between good and evil, but between comfort and clarity, between the mask and the truth beneath it. Society teaches us that to be good is to be agreeable. To be wise is to be silent. To be lovable is to be less. But Schopenhauer knew that suffering isn't always pain. It is the silence we endure when the world refuses to see us, not because we re invisible, but because we refuse to show what we really are. The shadow contains our pain, but it also contains our power. In the ruins of identity, something stirs. It's not rage, not revenge, clarity. The lion does not return with a roar. But with stillness, it does not demand. It simply is. Its very presence burns through every mask. Kierkegaard called this the paradox of the self, the need to go so deeply inward that the world no longer recognizes you. Because what you become in this process cannot be explained, only lived. You stop negotiating with others about who you are. You stop waiting for permission. You no longer need to be understood, because you finally understand yourself. The man, now kneeling in the room, places his hand on the fractured glass, and with one slow breath, he presses. The mirror doesn't resist. It shatters, not with violence, but with release. The pieces fall like petals, soft, glimmering, weightless, and beneath it is not a reflection, but a void, a vast, black, silent space, not empty, but pure. Here there are no roles, no labels, no shoulds, only presence, only truth, only the lion waiting to be seen. Alan Watts once said that the ego is a social construct, a mental image of ourselves held together by repetition. But when that image breaks, what remains is not a thing, is awareness, fluid, open, alive, not a name, not a brand, a being. And this is what it means to think like a lion, not to overpower, not to argue, but to see without illusion, to exist without apology, to know who you are, even when the world begs you to forget. The mirror is gone now, the man no longer confused, steps forward into the void. His steps are slow, but firm, because when the false self shatters, the real one doesn't need to scream. It walks, makes way. Silence is the first roar. There is a hush that follows the storm. Not the kind born from peace, but from realization. A quiet so full it presses against the ears. Stillness that doesn't ask for attention. It commands it. The lion has risen, but he does not roar. Not yet, he listens. For the first time, the world does not speak louder than his own thoughts. For the first time, the voices in his head are not echoes, but origins. This is the paradox of boldness, that it begins not in action, but in stillness. We imagine power to be noise, declarations, speeches, protests, but the lion newly awakened knows otherwise. He knows that real power moves in silence, that clarity is quieter than chaos, that the loudest man in the room is usually the one most unsure of himself. The man sits beside a still lake. Not metaphorically. He is alone, truly alone, for perhaps the first time. There are no mirrors, no screens, no questions being asked of him, no applause waiting to be earned. Just the wind brushing across the surface, the breath of trees, the whisper of water, and in that silence, he hears it. His own voice. Carl Jung spoke of individuation, the process of becoming whole by integrating all the lost parts of oneself. But integration is not a celebration, it's a reconstruction. A rebuilding after the mirror has shattered, and in that rebuilding, something unexpected appears. Silence, not as a void, but as foundation. Schopenhauer believed that silence was the final form of wisdom, because only in silence can the self emerge untethered, not performed, not edited, not filtered. To think boldly is not to shout ideas into the void. It's to listen so deeply that the world's noise loses its grip on you. Picture the man walking through a city. Same streets, same people. But everything is different now, not because the city changed, because he did. Where once there was noise, now there is texture. Where once there were crowds, now there are faces. Where once there was urgency, now there is space. Silence has recalibrated his senses. Boldness isn't always a step forward. Sometimes it is a step inward. Kierkegaard knew this. He called it the leap of faith. Not a leap toward belief in a god or idea, but a leap into one's own soul, without needing validation, to dare to think. Not for performance, not for applause, but for truth, is the boldest act of all. There is a moment of stillness in every transformation. Breath, a sacred pause. Not because you are lost, because you are no longer rushing toward being found. You simply are. The man sits beneath an archway of ruins, stone crumbled by time, vines wrapped through its ribs like veins reclaiming a dead idea. He runs his fingers over the old carvings. Symbols of identities he once worshipped. The achiever, the good son, the intellectual, the peacemaker. He smiles. Not with bitterness, with reverence. They were masks. But they served their purpose, and now in the stillness he thanks them, then leaves them behind. Alan Watts once said, "Muddy water is best cleared by leaving it alone." So he lets go. Not of thought, but of striving. The lion has nothing to prove, because his presence alone is truth. Silence becomes a companion, not empty, but fertile.
No.
A soil in which bold thoughts begin to grow, not loudly, but deeply. They rise through the stillness like wildflowers in the ruins, unpredictable, unapproved, but undeniably real. The lion begins to walk again, not toward anything, not away from anything, just forward. His steps are not dramatic, but the earth remembers them, not because he is loud, but because he is undeniable. You see, the boldest thoughts are not spoken. They are felt. They live in the subtle shift of gaze and the calm refusal to conform, in the quiet certainty of one who knows himself.
Ow.
This is the moment most people miss, because the world taught them to look for revolutions in the streets. But the true revolutions happen in silence, inside the soul. Friedrich Nietzsche once said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." The man has found his why, not in ideology, not in theory, but in silence. Because in silence, there are no scripts, no audiences, no need for explanation. There is only truth. And truth does not shout. The camera pans out. We see the man standing on a cliff. The world below, loud, spinning, shining, but he is still. Like a monument not built, but remembered. He closes his eyes, smiles, and breathes. No roar, no sermon. Just a presence that says, "I am here. I am awake. And I am no longer echoing anything but myself." To walk alone without apology, there is a road that stretches through fog. It is narrow, winding, and silent. No signs, no markers, no map. Only footsteps. One set. Yours, you are not running anymore. Not hiding. Not searching. You are walking. And you are alone. But this time, you are not lonely. The lion does not look back to see who is watching. He moves through the tall grass with presence, not performance. Because he wants to be seen, but because he no longer fears being unseen. This is what it means to think boldly in a world addicted to noise. To stop explaining yourself, stop shrinking for comfort. To stop editing your truth to fit into someone else's idea of peace. The man steps out of the cave, not reborn, but remembered. The world is the same, busy, loud, demanding. But his eyes have changed. He sees the machine, the algorithm of behavior, the factory of identity. He watches people speak not from themselves, but from the scripts they were given, and he does not hate them. He simply no longer needs to be them. Carl Jung said that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But there is a cost, and the cost is approval. To walk alone is to leave behind the warm bath of being liked. To give up the currency of fitting in, but what you gain is sovereignty. You no longer ask the world to tell you who you are. You carry that knowing like fire in your chest, quiet, uncompromising. In the city, people rush, their eyes fixed on glowing screens, their minds filled with borrowed thoughts. They speak fast, agree faster. They call it connection. But the man now walking through the same streets sees differently. He listens, hears noise. He pauses and feels stillness. He is not better, not separate, but he is free. Friedrich Nietzsche's vision of the Bermensch was not of a godlike figure shouting from mountaintops. It was the individual who has surpassed the need for systems, tribes, and dogmas to define him, who walks through a world of masks and says, "I will not wear one." Not because he rebels, because he remembers. Remembers the lion. There is no applause for this kind of clarity. You will not be celebrated for walking alone. You will not trend. You will not be the algorithm's favorite. So the world does not know what to do with someone it cannot predict. But that's the point. You become a question the world cannot answer. A silence that disturbs the noise. A mirror that does not flatter but reflects. And in your presence, others feel something awaken in themselves. Not admiration, but remembrance. Kierkegaard once said, "The crowd is untruth." And yet, we spend our lives begging the crowd to tell us who we are. To walk alone is to finally accept that no one else can give you your name. No tradition, no philosophy, no personality quiz. Only you. The man stops before a fountain in the center of the city. Children play. Laughter echoes, phones flash. And yet, in the stillness between moments, he feels it. Not detachment, not superiority, but clarity. He does not reject the world, simply no longer bargains with it. Alan Watts spoke of the self as an illusion, a game the universe plays. But even illusions, once seen clearly, can be navigated with grace. You are not a brand, not a belief system, not a role. You are a presence. Presence needs no introduction. In this life, there will always be people who misunderstand you, who demand explanations, who feel threatened by your silence. Let them. Lions do not hold press conferences. They do not explain why they left the herd. They do not correct the whispers behind them. They walk, and that is enough. Not because it's easy, but because it's true. Schopenhauer knew that solitude was not punishment. It was purification. In solitude, you do not escape others. You reclaim yourself. You learn to trust your instincts, to follow the thread of thought without needing consensus, to find joy in simplicity and meaning in silence. You learn that your worth is not up for discussion. This is not arrogance. This is dignity. A quiet confidence that comes not from superiority, but from alignment. You no longer perform authenticity, you live it. You no longer seek clarity, you are it. The man walks down a narrow path through a forest. The sun filters through the trees like a blessing. He does not hurry. He has no destination, no audience, no need. And in that is powerful. To walk alone without apology is to accept that your mind is yours, your time is yours, your soul is yours, and it was never meant to be negotiated. So if you feel distant from the crowd, if you feel strange for not fitting in, if you feel like a lion in a world of sheep, good, that means you're close. Keep walking, not with anger, not with pride, but with presence. Because once you begin to walk without apology, the world begins to reshape itself around your silence. Not because it understands you, but because it knows it cannot move you. The world bows to the bold. There's a strange beauty in returning to the world. After you've seen it clearly, the noise is still there. The face is still hurried. The mirror is still warped. The fog still thick in places. But something is different. You are no longer a passenger in this storm. You are the stillness inside it. A lion does not roar to be feared. It simply exists, and the world makes space. It doesn't push. It doesn't plead. It doesn't prove. It stands. And it's enough. You walk down the same streets that once made you feel small. You're the same voices that once bent your thoughts. But now, you do not move with them. You move through them. You are no longer prey to their rhythms. You are the silent counterpoint. The calm in a world addicted to urgency. Carl Jung spoke of individuation, the lifelong task of becoming whole. And you have returned whole. Not perfect, not complete, but integrated. The persona no longer controls you. The shadow no longer threatens you. You have made peace with every part of yourself, even the ones that once made you flinch. This final chapter is not about rebellion. It is not about noise. It is about clarity, a clarity so quiet. It disarms everything that tries to name you. You have nothing to prove because you are no longer confused. The lion does not conquer. It does not negotiate. It radiates. The world bows, not in submission, but in recognition. It senses something it forgot how to name: sovereignty. Friedrich Nietzsche envisioned the Bermensch not as a warrior, but as a presence so real, so full, that it renders falsehood irrelevant. The bold thinker doesn't destroy the system. He simply outgrows it. And by doing so, he becomes ungovernable. In the city, nothing has changed. But the man walking through it is not the same. He no longer reacts. He responds. He no longer mimics. He creates. His thoughts are not declarations, but quiet revolutions. They do not seek agreement. They seek truth. And that truth, even when spoken in silence, moves mountains. Kierkegaard once described the knight of faith, a man who walks the world with inward certainty. It appears ordinary to those around him. That is what you've become, not a prophet, not a performer, but a man who has made peace with paradox, who smiles at the absurd, and walks through uncertainty with open hands. You are not here to fix the world. You are not here to argue with it. You are here to see it, truly, to understand its illusions, to navigate its fog without becoming lost in it. Alan Watts taught that the ego is a performance we forget is a performance. But now you see the stage, you see the actors, you hear the lines before they are spoken, and instead of clinging to the script, you leave the theater altogether, not in bitterness, in grace. Schopenhauer believed that true peace came not from achievement, but from quiet understanding, from solitude willingly chosen, from suffering willingly integrated. You now carry that peace with you, not because life is easy, but because you are steady. A lion in human skin does not seek the herd, nor does he shame it, simply sees it for what it is, a safety that demands a price he can no longer afford. He walks alone, not because he must, but because that is where clarity lives. And here is the final paradox. When you no longer need to be seen, you become unignorable. When you no longer need to lead, others begin to follow. Not your words, but your way of being. You become the reminder that thinking is still possible, that depth still matters, that silence can still be louder than the crowd. The world bows, not in submission, but in awe, not because you forced it to, but because you finally stopped asking for permission. And now you simply are. You, the one who descended into the cave, who shattered the mirror, who sat with the abyss, who listened in silence, who walked without apology, have returned, not to change the world, but to be unchanged by it. And that is the rarest power of all. So let the world speak. Let it demand. Let it swirl in its rituals. You have no more masks to wear, no more roles to perform, no more cages to enter. You have remembered the lion, and in doing so, you have remembered yourself. Walk on, not louder, but clearer, not above the world, but beneath its illusions. Not to be seen, but to see and to be what no one can look away from. A presence, a question, a lion.